The wedding hall went silent just as Kang Jisoo reached for Yura's hand. Crystal chandeliers threw gold light across white orchids, cut glass, and the polished faces of people who had come to watch power seal itself in diamonds. Then the doors opened. Winter wind slipped through the velvet-lined room, and a woman in a dark coat stood beneath it like a truth no one had invited. 3 children stood at her side, close enough to touch her legs, old enough to understand that everyone inside had turned to stare. Nia James did not lower her chin. That only seemed to offend the room more. A few guests looked first at her plain coat still damp from snow, then at her deep brown skin, then at the children, as if deciding which part of her did not belong in all that lacquered wealth. Yura's smile sharpened. Seo Yoon, the matriarch, did not even bother to hide her contempt. One of the older men near the front muttered something about audacity, and a woman near him answered with a dry laugh that cut sharper than broken glass. Then Seoyeon lifted 2 fingers, and security began to move. The children noticed first. The smallest one tightened his grip on Nia's hand. Another stepped half in front of his sisters. Yura's voice rang out, silky and cruel. "Remove them before this becomes embarrassing." But before the guards reached her, the little boy looked straight at Jisoo, his dark eyes steady in a face that mirrored the man at the altar, and said one soft word. "Appa," he said, meaning father. Jisoo did not look at the child first. He looked at the black camellia bracelet on Nia's wrist, the one he had clasped there years ago, the one that should never have found its way back into this room unless something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. Jisoo lowered his hand from Yura's and turned toward the woman he had buried alive in his memory. No one breathed when Jisoo stepped down from the altar. His shoes crossed Italian marble with a quiet that felt more dangerous than shouting. He did not hurry. He never had to. Men who built empires rarely ran toward trouble. They made trouble wait for them. When he stopped in front of Nia, the room leaned inward, hungry for humiliation. It never came. "Stand down," he said to security. That should have been enough, but Seo Yoon rose anyway, silk rustling like a warning. "Jisoo." He did not look at his mother. He looked at Nia, then at the children. No one touches them. Public power reversal 1 landed so fast the room nearly missed it. Jisoo turned to the guests, to the donors, to the men who had come to witness his marriage and strengthen their ties to his empire. "The ceremony is over," he said. "Anyone who cannot remain respectful may leave before I help them decide." The insult that had been circling Nia died in every throat at once. Yura's face lost colour beneath perfect makeup. "You cannot be serious." "I was serious when I walked to the altar," he said. "I am clearer now." He led Nia and the children through a side corridor lined with gilt mirrors and expensive flowers, away from the whispers and camera phones and the scent of champagne gone sour. In a private suite above the ballroom, the air changed. It smelled of cedar, black tea, and money too old to speak loudly about itself. The children did not wander. That told him more than words could. Nia removed her gloves finger by finger, steady as ever. "I didn't come to beg." "I know," he said. "The children are yours." He absorbed it without visible shock, but the muscles in his jaw shifted once. "Names." "Amari, Noel, Elias." 3 futures stood before him in winter shoes and borrowed courage. Nia met his eyes. "I left because your world stopped being dangerous only to you. I came back because your mother's people found my address last week." His gaze sharpened. "Why now?" "Because Yura did not want whispers," Nia said. "She wanted us erased before vows made it permanent." The oldest girl reached into her small coat pocket and set a cream envelope on the low table between them. 3 birth certificates rested inside. Each carried the same surname. When Jisoo opened the envelope, he realized someone had already tried to tamper with what should have been untouchable. Snow tapped against the suite windows while the children drank hot chocolate brought up on silent wheels by a terrified manager who had never seen Kang Jasu look at anything the way he looked at those three small faces. Nia watched every door, every movement, every hand that came too near. She had not survived the last few years by confusing love with safety. The certificates were real, but one seal had been lifted and pressed down again. Jisoo called for independent testing, and Naya agreed before he finished the sentence. She did not bristle. She did not plead. "I brought truth," she said, "not performance." That answer followed him later, after he moved them to a townhouse he owned under another name, tucked on a quiet street where brick steps held traces of snow and children's chalk still ghosted the pavement. It was not lavish. It was warm. The hallway smelled faintly of laundry soap and cinnamon. Tiny shoes lined the entrance in 3 crooked pairs. A school calendar hung beside the kitchen with overdue library books circled in blue ink. The sight hit him harder than any threat had in years. Noel had fallen asleep at the table, cheek against folded arms. Elias had built a careful tower of sugar packets. Amari sat in the window seat with a book upside down, watching him the way only children and enemies truly watched. Nia stood by the sink beneath one yellow light. "They know you from photographs." He looked at the black camellia bracelet on her wrist. "You kept it. I almost sold it twice. But you didn't." Her mouth softened, but not enough to be called mercy. "It reminded me that once, before power got greedy, you knew how to give something without using it as a leash." That night, after the children slept and the townhouse settled into its small, honest sounds, he stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom where 3 narrow beds had been lined up beneath a shelf of books. He said nothing for a long time. Then he finally did. "I kept the nursery in my penthouse untouched for 4 years." Nia turned. He was still as stone, but grief had reached his eyes at last. "I thought you had chosen to disappear," he said. "I told myself anger was cleaner than loss." For the first time she saw the wound under the suit, under the empire, under the terrifying calm he wore like skin. Private vulnerability. One had arrived not as collapse, but as confession. Before she could answer, his phone lit up with a message from the lab director. The blood samples had been delayed because someone inside the hospital had tried to redirect the file. Someone had been waiting years for those children to become useful enough to target. By morning, the city had already begun feeding on the scandal. A society blog posted blurred photos from the aborted wedding. A finance site speculated about succession. A rival crew leaked a story about hidden heirs. By noon, Seo-yoon demanded a family council at the glass tower where the Kang Empire kept its legal face polished and spotless. Naya arrived in a charcoal dress, her hair swept back, the black camellia bracelet at her wrist and nothing else. The boardroom was all lacquered walnut, river views, and silence sharpened by hostility. Men twice her age looked at her like a complication. Women in pale silk looked at her like a stain on an expensive tablecloth. Yura looked at her like prey she had once expected to finish. One elder did not bother lowering his voice. "We are discussing legacy, not sentiment." Nia turned toward him before Jisoo could. "Then speak to the mother of the heirs, not around her." The room twitched. Seo-yoon's stare hardened. "You left." "I survived," Nia replied. That was when public power reversal 2 hit. Jisoo rose, took the chair at his right, the one reserved for blood family, and pulled it back for Nia himself. The sound of wood against stone cracked across the room. "Anyone speaking about her," he said, "will now speak to her. Anyone disrespecting her will answer to me before the hour ends." He placed a black velvet box on the table, opened it, and set inside it the family ring meant for Yura. Then he pushed the box away. "There will be no marriage." Yura went still. "You would humiliate me for a woman who vanished?" "No," he said. "I am refusing to build a future on a lie." Seo-yoon's voice lowered with dangerous control. And what future will you build, Jisoo? One ruled by scandal? Before he answered, Yura placed one manicured hand over her abdomen and smiled through gathering panic. You may want to delay your declarations, she said. I'm carrying your child. The room shifted again, greed replacing judgment so quickly it would have been laughable if it were not so ugly. Naya did not flinch, but the look Jisoo gave Yura made it clear that one of the women in that room had just made a fatal mistake. Yura's claim moved through the city like perfume through smoke. Some men backed away from Nia at once, pretending principle where they had once smelled opportunity. Some turned toward Yura again, eager to serve whichever womb seemed closest to power. Seo-yoon did not hide her renewed calculation. To the matriarch, bloodline was not love. It was architecture. Nia refused to perform jealousy for any of them. When she returned to the townhouse, she found a new security team outside, quiet and disciplined. Inside, the children were painting at the kitchen table. Amari had painted 5 black flowers in a row. These are camellias, he said without looking up. Mama says they bloom even when the weather turns rude. Jisoo arrived after dark. He found Nia on the roof, wrapped in a wool coat, the city below them all hard light and winter steel. For a while they stood without speaking. His presence altered the cold around her without asking permission. That had always been his most dangerous gift. The dates in Yura's file don't hold, he said at last. The doctor signed records on a day she was in Paris. Nia exhaled slowly. So she lied. She lied badly. The corner of her mouth almost moved. Then his hand went to the knot of his tie, loosened it once, and he looked out over the skyline. My father believed sons were insurance, he said. My mother believed heirs were the only thing that made softness affordable. I built myself into something they could never call weak. His voice stayed level. That made the ache inside it worse. I did not know how to love you without fearing I would drag you under, he said. When you disappeared, I told myself the Empire had won something. It hadn't. It had only emptied the room. She turned toward him then, and in the silver wash of winter moonlight, his control looked less like strength and more like a scar that had learned to breathe. Private vulnerability, too, stood between them, quiet and devastating. Nia's voice was low. You don't get to tell me that now and call it enough. I know. For the first time in years, his answer held no defense. Below them, a car door slammed. One of his men called up from the street with urgent restraint. A second lab had confirmed the children's paternity. At the same time, another message arrived. Someone had accessed the old file from Nia's divorce. The document that had ended their marriage was about to prove it had never truly been hers. The divorce file had not merely been filed, it had been built. Signatures existed where Nia had never signed. Delivery receipts showed notices sent to an apartment she had never lived in. A witness had sworn she accepted settlement terms while she had been in another state giving birth. Every page smelled of expensive fraud. Nia sat at the townhouse table with copies spread before her, a mug of untouched tea cooling beside her hand. The children played in the next room with blocks and soft music. She traced a thumb over a wax mark stamped faintly in the corner of one page. Not legal, personal. Yura's seal. She wanted me gone before the children were born, Nia said. Jisoo stood across from her, coat still on, fury disciplined into precision. My mother wanted obedience. Yura wanted vacancy. And both found it convenient. He did not deny it. That mattered. The next pressure came from Seo-yoon, not through threats, but through elegance. She invited Nia to lunch at a private dining room above one of the family's hotels, all ivory linen, silver chopsticks and flowers that looked too perfect to be real. Seo-yoon spoke softly, as women with the most power often did. You are intelligent, she said. Take the children and go. I will secure them for life. Nia folded her napkin once and placed it beside her plate. Secure them from whom? Seo-yoon did not answer quickly enough. Nia rose. I did not return to sell my children to fear dressed in silk. At the door, Seo-yoon's voice followed her. You think he will choose you over the empire? Nia turned back, calm as polished stone. No, I think he is about to learn what the empire costs. That night, Elias said something that changed the shape of everything. The pretty lady came before, he murmured, half asleep against Nia's shoulder. She asked if Papa knew where we lived. Nia went still. Jisoo, standing in the doorway, went colder than the winter outside. Yura had not just discovered them. She had found them long ago and waited. If Yura had known about the children for months, then her next move had already been planned. Jisoo moved faster after that, but never loudly. Accounts connected to Yura began freezing one by one. Invitations disappeared from her calendar. Men who had smiled too quickly at her calls stopped answering. Still, Nia understood the truth before he said it aloud. A cornered woman with ambition and no conscience was most dangerous when stripped of certainty. He came to the townhouse before dawn carrying a leather folder. The children were still asleep. Pale blue light touched the window glass. The house smelled like toast and the lavender soap Noelle loved too much. Nia accepted the folder, opened it, and found school transfer papers, a deed to a safe property outside the city, medical authorizations, and legal acknowledgements signed by Jisoo himself. If you want distance, he said, it is yours. If you want my name nowhere near them until this is done, that will be honored. If you want every resource I have without ever seeing me again, say it. She read each page carefully. He did not rush her. That restraint hurt more than pressure would have. This is you trying to protect us, she said. Yes. And this is you asking nothing? Yes. Nia closed the folder and set it down. Then she slipped the black camellia bracelet off her wrist. The skin beneath it looked strangely bare. This is me choosing myself, she said. I will not hide as your secret while another woman uses your shadow to threaten my children. I will not stand in a waiting room hoping power remembers my name. If there is ever anything between us again, it will stand in daylight. She placed the bracelet in his palm. That was the choice moment, clean and final. She did not choose him. She chose her dignity. He closed his fingers around the bracelet as if it was something holy and dangerous at once. Understood. He left without touching her because he respected the line she had drawn even while it cut him open. Hours later, alone in his car, he turned the bracelet over and found the clasp had loosened with age. A thin strip of folded paper slid into his hand. On it was Seo-yoon's private seal and a sentence that had never reached him. She is carrying your children, but Yura says the timing can still be corrected. Jisoo finally understood that the woman who had tried to marry him had once tried to erase his family before it began. He confronted Seo-yoon that night in the old family house where the walls were panelled in dark wood and every portrait looked disappointed in the living. The matriarch sat beside a low lamp, her posture immaculate, a porcelain cup untouched near her elbow. When he placed the note in front of her, she did not pretend surprise. Age had not softened her. It had refined her into something sharper. I believed Yura when she told me Nia was using the pregnancy to secure herself, Seo-yoon said. And when you learned she was not? Her gaze flickered once. By then, you had already become the man this world required. I told myself loss had made you stronger. Jisoo's silence was terrible. You did not protect the family, he said. You protected a tradition that feeds on it. For the first time, something like regret moved across Seo-yoon's face. Not enough to excuse her, enough to wound. He did not raise his voice. Tomorrow, you will attend the succession dinner. You will sit, you will watch, and you will not interfere when truth arrives. At the townhouse, Nia listened without interrupting when he told her everything. He did not ask for absolution. He gave facts, apology, and choice. I should have seen it sooner, he said. You should have, she answered. He accepted that too. Then Noelle padded down the stairs, clutching a blanket, hair wild from sleep. She saw Jisoo, hesitated, and held out a drawing. 5 figures stood beneath black flowers. You were missing, she said. He took the paper with care that could have broken her heart if she had let it. The next evening, the succession dinner unfolded in a private ballroom lit by amber lamps and reflected city light. Men arrived in dark suits. Women glittered like strategy. Yura entered last, wrapped in cream silk, the family ring on her hand and triumph in her smile. She believed the room still belonged to her. Curiosity. Hook Nia saw the ring on Yura's finger and knew the woman was either desperate enough to gamble or arrogant enough to think no one could stop her. The dinner began with ritual and ended with ruin. Yura stood first, elegant and composed, speaking of continuity, devotion, and the burden of standing beside powerful men. Then she turned her gaze toward Nia, with practiced pity. Some women mistake access for belonging, she said. Children deserve truth, not emotional theatre. The insult moved through the room like a match near dry paper. Every eye shifted to Nia. She sat straight-backed in midnight blue, hands folded, giving Yura nothing to claw at. Then Yura produced new documents, medical letters, inheritance recommendations, a statement claiming Nia had hidden the children to extort the Kang family. Gasps rose. Seo-yoon shut her eyes once. Several elders leaned forward, already preparing to retreat from Nia all over again. Jisoo remained seated until the room had fully exposed itself. Then he stood. Public power reversal 3 did not explode. It settled, cold and absolute. The trouble with counterfeit devotion, he said, is that it always leaves a seam. He took the black camellia bracelet from his inner pocket and placed it on the table beneath the lights. The old jeweler who had made it was already present, summoned quietly. So was an independent attorney. So was the hospital administrator whose records had finally been recovered. Jisoo opened the bracelet's clasp and unfolded the hidden strip inside. The original family registry number of his marriage to Nia, sealed years earlier, never lawfully dissolved. The jeweler confirmed when it had been made. The administrator confirmed Nia's pregnancy records, the triplet's birth, and the attempts to bury both. The attorney confirmed Yura's documents had been fabricated using company funds routed through shell charities that had already triggered legal review. Yura's face changed at last. You planned this, she whispered. No, Nia said, rising beside Jisoo at last. You did. We simply stopped letting you narrate it. Security entered then, not for Nia this time, but for Yura. Behind them stood investigators in dark coats, carrying warrants for embezzlement, document fraud, and financial coercion. Not one elder moved to protect her. Power loved winners until proof arrived. Yura turned desperately toward Seo-yoon. You needed me. Seo-yoon's answer was colder than winter marble. I needed an heir. You offered poison in silk. As Yura was escorted out, cameras flashed beyond the ballroom doors. Her fall would not be private. Her money was frozen, her social standing dead, her lies preserved in public record. The room that had once judged Nia now stood to make space for her. Jisoo looked only at her. I will spend the rest of my life proving this, he said, in front of witnesses, enemies, and blood. Not asking you to forget it. Curiosity. Hook, Nia had finally gotten justice, but the man before her was now asking for something more dangerous than forgiveness. A future. Power changed shape after truth. Some men resigned before they could be dismissed. Some factions bent quickly toward the safer wind. Seo-yoon relinquished day-to-day control under terms Jisoo drafted himself, and for the first time in decades, the Kang Empire was forced to imagine succession without sacrificing children to it. Nia did not move back into Jisoo's world because he asked. She moved only after he changed it. He shut down the heir ceremony entirely. He moved legitimate businesses into a trust insulated from criminal inheritance games. He established protections that named the triplets as family without naming them property. He made one truth public through every legal channel he owned. No child of his would be raised as collateral. Then he came to the townhouse one rainy evening with nothing in his hands but an umbrella and honesty. The children were building a blanket fort in the living room. Warm lamplight softened the walls. Steam lifted from tomato soup on the stove. Rain ran down the windows in silver threads. The house no longer looked temporary. Naya met him by the doorway. "I am not here to ask you to come back because I want things as they were," he said. "I am here because I destroyed what they were. I am asking whether I may help build what comes next." She studied him, this man who could silence a city with a glance and yet waited for her answer as though it were the only verdict that mattered. "You hurt me," she said. "Yes." "You let other people define my place?" "Yes." "And if this begins again, it begins with respect, not possession." His voice was quiet. "Then let it begin there." Elias peeked out from the blanket fort. "Are you staying for soup?" Jisoo looked at Nia before answering. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and took out the black camellia bracelet. For a breath, neither moved. Then she stepped forward and placed it in his hand. "Put it on me properly this time," she said. His fingers were careful as he fastened it around her wrist. The room seemed to exhale. Just as the clasp clicked shut, all three children looked up and asked the question that would decide what home meant now. 6 months later, spring reached the city in black camellias, blooming in a courtyard Jisoo had restored behind a brownstone no gossip site would ever call grand enough for a man like him. That was one reason he loved it. Morning light spilled across hardwood floors and toy cars, and the edge of a newspaper carrying a headline about Yura's sentencing and the final seizure of her fraudulent holdings. Her fall had been complete, public, and deserved. No whisper remained to defend her. Consequence had done what reputation never could. Seo-yoon came only by invitation now. Age had not humbled her entirely, but truth had thinned her certainty. The first time she stood in the doorway holding a box of children's books instead of an order, Nia had almost laughed at the strangeness of it. The apology that followed was imperfect, late, and real enough to count. Nia accepted it for the children's peace, not because memory had gone soft. Jisoo kept every promise that mattered. He appeared for school mornings, doctor visits, and ordinary dinners. He learned who hated peas, who feared thunderstorms, who always pretended not to want a second bedtime story. He did not speak of legacy around them. He spoke of music lessons, scraped knees, and how to tell when someone deserved trust. Nia watched him become a father in daylight, not in secrecy, and that did more than flowers or vows ever could. On a quiet evening, after the triplets had fallen asleep in a tangle of blankets and storybooks, she found him in the courtyard beneath the first open blooms. The air smelled of damp earth and tea. He looked up as she approached, and for once the man the city feared looked like exactly what he had become in private, a husband remade by choice and a father made honest by love. Her black camellia bracelet caught the porch light when she reached for his hand. Inside, the house was warm. Outside, the last of winter had finally let go. And in the life they had nearly lost, dignity had returned first, then trust, then something even rarer than power. Peace had arrived, and this time, it stayed.